Hello, my name is Dave Emory, and in this segment we're going to begin our examination of the remarkable new book Blood Oath by Stephen Worth, W-O-R-T-H, and Carl Jaspers, J-A-S-P-E-R-S, subtitled The Conspiracy to Murder Nicole Brown Simpson. This book was just published in softcover by Rainbow Books, copyright 1996. The ISBN number is 1-56825-058-4. This book is about an alleged conspiracy. I suspect this book is accurate in the vast bulk of its information, but the final confirmation has yet to come. I think this book is right on the money, although a few details may be disinformation. The authors hold open that possibility. This book is about a white supremacist plot to murder Nicole Brown Simpson, to frame O.J. Simpson for the murder, and in turn to use this event to divide the races in the United States, to discredit and alter the judicial system, and to discredit law enforcement, the LAPD in particular, and also to polarize law enforcement officers and to recruit them into the white supremacist camp. I'm going to begin by reading the author's prologue and how they came to access this particular story via an informant who, like all of the other participants in this elite white supremacist strike team, is identified only by a code name. By the way, listeners to this segment should contact Spitfire and get a hold, and in fact they will be provided with our interview with Stephen Worth that should precede this particular series of half-hour segments taken from the book Blood Oath. Blood Oath, The Conspiracy to Murder Nicole Brown Simpson, begins with the following prologue explaining how the authors came to this story. This story begins, as does the story of the murders themselves, far from the grisly scene where Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Lyle Goldman were brutally slain. It all began months after the killings in a small, quiet community nestled safely within the rolling hills of Westchester County, inside the borders of New York State, where I, Stephen Worth, was engrossed in the day-to-day operation of a small corporation. 2,500 miles away, my co-author Carl Jaspers, a freelance writer, consultant, and ex-magazine columnist, was living and working in Los Angeles, California, the city of angels and of demons. Our on-and-off collaboration on various projects had spanned a period of 15 years. A strange combination of luck and fate brought us together to work on this book, our latest project. It all began during a busy lunch hour on Monday, April 24th, 1995. A telephone caller wanted to know if I was in the office that day. About an hour later, a plain manila envelope addressed to my true identity without a return address was delivered. It has been left just inside the side door of the building that housed my offices. The envelope contained a Los Angeles Times front-page article dated July 16th, 1993, and a note that claimed its author was responsible for the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. I had been fascinated by the Brown-Goldman murder case as it unfolded, especially the swirling controversies that were starting to surround the various pieces of evidence, their locations, and how some of the evidence got to where it was found. In researching the subject, I contacted O.J.'s defense team and various city agencies, including the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, Los Angeles Police Department, or LAPD, the mayor's office, and several Los Angeles newspapers. It is highly likely that a person in one of these offices or a person intercepting their calls had passed my name and phone number on to an interested third party. The note, cut and pasted from newsprint, read, "Too many innocents have died. Oklahoma City is the latest. More is yet to come. I heard you are a writer. I have a story to tell. I helped frame O.J. Simpson and kill Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. I will contact you again." The caption of the article read, "Alleged white supremacists seized in assassination plot. Crime, Rodney King, First AME Church were among targets of at least one suspect, investigators say. Agents tracked Southland's hate group's activities for 18 months, leading to the 8 arrests." A reproduction of the complete front-page article is included in the appendices, copied from the original. At 10 minutes to 5 that afternoon, a man with a deep, raspy voice that sounded as though it had been ruined by cigarettes called. Without offering pleasantries, he asked me if I was interested in his story. Receiving a qualified yes, He directed me to take the envelope and note he had delivered, along with a pad of paper and a pen, to a payphone a couple of blocks away. If I wanted the story, I would have to be there in 5 minutes to receive another call. Thus began one of the most bizarre collaborations in the history of American journalism apart from Watergate. I was being handed my own deep-throat informant. The crime was the O.J. Simpson murders. During the first conversation, the informant rambled on about his reasons for wanting to talk. In spite of his ramblings, he didn't seem stupid. On the contrary, he seemed to be quite an intelligent and well-informed man. However, he did seem nervous and agitated. He said he wanted to establish some ground rules so he could feel more comfortable about what he had to do. At the end of the call, he asked me to leave the envelope and note on top of the payphone. The informant was obsessed with concealing his identity. He didn't bother to offer an alias. I assigned him the code name Skinner so I could address him by name. Skinner liked his new name, chuckling that it fit his personality. His cryptic fashioning of the message piqued my curiosity. When I inquired why the Denver Post was included on the note, Skinner responded just as cryptically, quote, "In time, it will become self-evident," unquote. He became agitated when I pressed him further and would offer nothing else. Skinner's ramblings in that first conversation are summarized and presented in Chapter 4 from notes taken that day. Subsequent conversations are summarized in succeeding chapters. Wherever possible, as part of the agreement with the informant, his words are presented verbatim with little editing. To meet this goal, Skinner agreed to allow the taping of his conversations, but with an all-important caveat. Skinner's voice flowed through the receiver like a cold, icy wind. Quote, "Tape our conversations. Turn the voice into written words, then destroy the tape. Don't reuse the tape or make copies. Each session will require a new tape and the destruction of the earlier one. A voice analyzer will be used to check your responses to my inquiries on this matter. Don't ever forget my blood oath, reprinted on page 3 before the preface of this book," unquote. By the way, the blood oath is the oath of the Bruderschweigen, or Silent Brotherhood. That is the American Nazi organization that evolved from the Order, founded by Robert J. Matthews. More about that later on in this discussion, and of which this elite white supremacist strike team, and we're going to talk about its name, was an outgrowth. The oath is, "Let me bear witness to you, my brothers, that should an enemy of our cause, whether he be from within or from without, and cause hurt to you, I will chase him to the ends of the earth and remove his head from his body." That's the oath that members of this organization apparently had to take, and that members of the Order did as well. And again, the informant, Skinner, informed Stephen Worth and his co-author that he should not ever forget that oath. Continuing with the narrative, "I knew two things for a certainty. One, voice analyzers existed, and two, I wasn't going to cross him." His last 6 words still haunt me. I raced back to my office and called my co-author, the perennial bachelor, who was just leaving for a 9 p.m. screening of the previous weekend's smash hit film, While You Were Sleeping. He was intrigued. Less than a year before, he had sat transfixed on the San Diego freeway trying to drive south. All traffic had stopped while a white Ford Bronco headed in the opposite direction sped toward Brentwood at 55 miles per hour with what seemed like dozens of police cars in pursuit. The shoulders of the freeway were lined with cars cheering the Bronco on. Fans and banners that proclaimed, quote, "We love O.J., unquote, hung from the railings of overpasses. At the wheel was Al Cowlings. Crouched down in the back seat was O.J. himself. It was rumored he had a loaded gun, a passport, and $10,000 in cash. My co-author remembered thinking it was quite a spectacle. He never dreamed he would be asked to jump into the middle of the O.J. controversy 10 months later. When I told him about the informant, he didn't have to think. He suggested we go for it and canceled his plans for the evening. Together we discussed Skinner and the believability of his story. We made tentative plans to proceed with a jointly written book if Skinner's story held up. The division of labor was worked out. I would talk to Skinner, take notes, and perform preliminary research of the facts using the many sides of O.J.-related material available through online services and on the Internet. Based on my notes and preliminary research, I would pound out a rough first draft, which I would then fax and or upload chapter by chapter to my co-author in L.A. His role would then be to dig deeper into the details of Skinner's story, to make sure they were possible as only someone in Los Angeles could do, and to reorganize my draft and rewrite it. Somehow, Skinner had learned that I traveled a lot. In fact, I was almost constantly on the road. Consequently, he insisted on telling his story to me via the phone at different locations around the country that corresponded with my prearranged travel. It was a test of perseverance. Skinner was not going to make it easy. He called me at the hotels in which I was staying. The times varied, but they were predominantly at night. He had to be the one making the calls. I could not call him. Instead, I received the calls at payphones in the hotel lobbies. I had no idea how Skinner obtained the numbers of these phones. He must have had help from someone within the various telephone companies involved. The states in which I received calls included New York, Texas, Utah, Nebraska, Maryland, and more. I began to feel I was being watched. He called me every few days over the next 8 weeks. On the phone, he insisted on doing most of the talking, often for over an hour or more, rarely letting me get a question in edgewise. He always seemed on the verge of hanging up, which he did a number of times when he felt like it. At the end of his story, the call stopped. We have not heard from our informant since mid-July of 1995. Skinner told a grand story, frequently losing himself in the drama of what he was saying, telling his story in dramatic and often pretentious cliched language. He often took the parts of the different characters he talked about. From time to time, he seemed to be imitating the voices of these people. Although he used their voices, he would never give them names. He would prompt me to suggest additional code names, giving me feedback on how close I came to capturing their personalities. True to his word, he checked the status of the previous tapes, and true to our word, we destroyed them. From the beginning, the informant seemed to be having fun with us, and we didn't trust him or his story. We felt manipulated like pawns, and often talked about ending our strange chessboard dance. Instead, a little voice inside one or the other always told us to hang in there a little longer. As authors, we threw ourselves into researching the facts Skinner had revealed. We did this primarily as a salve, hoping to soothe what at first seemed like a severe case of gullibility. By the way, I would add that, as you will see, I would not describe Skinner's language as pretentious, although I understand why the authors described it that way. Rather, I would describe it as the language of a true believer, and even though, as we shall see, Skinner relented concerning the crimes he had allegedly been involved in, nonetheless he remained steadfastly true to his fellow white supremacist comrades, and did not want to reveal their identities. So again, I would not describe his language as cliched or pretentious, although I can understand why the authors used those words. Rather, I would describe his language as the language of a true believer. Beginning again with this last paragraph. From the beginning, the informant seemed to be having fun with us, and we didn't trust him or his story. We felt manipulated like pawns, and often talked about ending our strange chessboard dance. Instead, a little voice inside one or the other always told us to hang in there a little longer. As authors, we threw ourselves into researching the facts that Skinner had revealed. We did this primarily as a salve, hoping to soothe what at first seemed like a severe case of gullibility. As Skinner's story and our research progressed, we began to recognize too many coincidences between his words, the slayings in Los Angeles, and the events described in the articles and reports we were researching. We were researching to dismiss any of it lightly. We read extensively about the slayings and the case against O.J., reading every page of grand jury and trial testimony. Taking advantage of my interest in such organizations as the Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish Defense League, and Klan Watch, we found and read their reports and talked to whomever at these organizations would talk to us. Reports of government commissions, national and local, concerned with the white supremacy movement and violence were ordered and read. A picture of a sordid underbelly of contemporary American culture began to emerge. We gradually came to believe that we no longer had a choice. There was a good possibility O.J. was framed, and in the way the informant described. we began to realize this book had to be written, regardless of our dislike and initial distrust of the informant. We also questioned our personal safety. Even though Skinner assured us that no harm would come to us when the book was published, we had our doubts. He insisted that the group of which he was a part knew that writers had their job to do, and that they would come after him, not us, for breaking his oath. And that is the basic thrust of how the authors came by the story of the conspiracy, or the alleged conspiracy, to murder Nicole Brown Simpson to frame O.J. Simpson. By the way, one of the conditions that their informant imposed was that 10% or more of the proceeds of the book be donated to a fund to assist the victims of the Oklahoma City bombing. And it was Skinner's contention that this same elite underground, white supremacist underground, was responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing. We should note that the informant had apparently had extensive combat experience in Vietnam, and that after Oklahoma City, he began to have the Vietnam-related nightmares that he had previously had, and the carnage at Oklahoma City, plus the apparent loss, or at least according to him, the loss of some of his kinsmen, which is a term he uses to refer to his fellow white supremacists, this led him to relent about what he had been participating in. And so he basically decided to come clean and break the story, although he was, again, steadfastly loyal to his white supremacist comrades in arms. By the way, the address for the fund for the victims of the Oklahoma City bombing, the mayor's office, the Mayor's Disaster Relief Fund, 200 West Walker, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73102. Now, the informant maintained to the authors, Stephen Worth and Carl Jaspers, that one of the operations that this group had been in, by the way, the group's name was CAUSE, standing for Christian Aryan Underground Special Enforcers, and this was an elite white supremacist team, as we shall see, composed of people with extraordinary military and law enforcement credentials in their pedigrees, that was put together to not only unite various white supremacist groups in this country, but to unite them in a program of combat, covert operations, and psychological operations, as we shall see. One of the incidents that they were apparently involved in, or allegedly involved in, according to Skinner, was the murder of a music producer named Brett Cantor. During the course of the O.J. Simpson trial, O.J.'s defense attorneys and also a few journalists pointed out the similarities between the way in which Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown had been murdered and the methodology in the unsolved murder of a music producer and nightclub owner named Brett Cantor, C-A-N-T-O-R, who was an acquaintance, by the way, of several of the principals in the case itself, meaning O.J., Nicole, and I believe Ron also. It is the contention of Skinner that some of his CAUSE compatriots murdered Brett Cantor when he refused to promote a white supremacist rock band named RAHOWA, R-A-H-O-W-A, standing for Racial Holy War. In Blood Oath, we see a description of, or we read a description of Brett Cantor's murder, or a recounting of Brett Cantor's murder as follows. After discussing the impending operation against Nicole Brown Simpson, codenamed Operation Thunderbolt, we read, "Damn," quote, this is quoting one of the white supremacists in CAUSE, codenamed the Enforcer, quote, "Damn, that's my kind of action. I can still see the look on that music promoter's face when we slit his throat, but not before we made a pincushion out of him. That Jew Cantor shouldn't have badmouthed the RAHOWA band and trashed the music we wanted him to promote. I think it was about 2:30 in the morning that we put him to sleep in his bedroom," unquote, sneered the Enforcer. Quote, "That was one more insignificant Jew we got in July. This time, we'll send a message to all who defy our ultimate goal of a pure white race. We can take a lesson from the Silent Brotherhood. Mulnix was the investigative chief who examined the murder scene of the Jew Berg. Mulnix said he'd seen everything from muggings to gangland slayings, but never saw anyone butchered the way Berg had been. So again, one of the operations that this group had allegedly been involved in was the murder of Brett Cantor for refusing to promote the Rahowa white supremacist band. It is also the contention of Skinner that this group had also been involved in the planning of a bombing of the AME Church, not the bombing, but the massacre of the parishioners of the AME Church in Los Angeles. A recounting of that allegation also is relayed or recounted in the book Blood Oath. We read, "For months after our failure to destroy the first AME, African Methodist Episcopal Church of Los Angeles, and its congregation in June of 1993, my kinsmen, the members of the newly formed cause, couldn't stop talking about it. We dissected the operation from every angle, discussing it over and over. Then, just as suddenly, our talk began to shift to an upcoming anniversary. Our leadership realized that although cause was growing in numbers, we needed to accelerate this growth tenfold to achieve our dream of a white nation within the United States. A major division between the races had to be achieved. The time was right in society. A simmering undercurrent of distrust had once again risen between the races." And again, it talks about race riots that occurred in various American cities in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Skipping down still further, "The fires of the L.A. riots were out, but we all knew the embers of hatred were still hot to the touch. We were sure that the least bit of fanning would turn those glowing embers into a roaring fire, a fire which would consume any bit of goodwill that had been established between the races. I remember very clearly the meeting where it all began. It was Saturday, the 9th of October, 1993, a very special day to those of us who were believers in Odinism. It had been ordered by the Christian Aryan Underground Special Enforcers, CAUSE, our newly formed militant arm. Its members were the elite of several groups which the authorities had called, quote, disjointed white supremacists, unquote. We laughed about how the cause had now become the country's worst nightmare. Joe Allen be damned. That, by the way, refers to an FBI informant who had helped to frustrate the plot against the AME Church. The authorities had been warned about us. They heard unconfirmed rumors that attempts were being made to create a combined unified force of racist white supremacists cooperating with organized violent militia. What made this group far more dangerous than any group before it was that it had unlimited financial assistance from a foreign terrorist group. More about that still later in this particular discussion. Skipping down still further, the enforcer told me about some of the planning for operations that had failed. They were bombings and killings that had been designed to ignite a race war by targeting highly visible niggers. And again, I'm using the terminology that Skinner uses here, so please forgive my use of strong language. I'm trying to present the verisimilitude of this particular account. They were to be the flint that would ignite already highly combustible feelings. The actions had far-reaching support, but the cooperation between the groups involved was inadequate. The enforcer recalled how a semi-coordinated operation to assassinate Rodney King and destroy the first African Methodist Episcopal Church in Los Angeles by the Fourth Reich Skinheads, or FRS, along with similar attempts in Oregon, had been discovered and aborted in July. The enforcer ended his story with a string of curse words and then, quote, "This was the perfect illustration of what happens when a small group, unskilled in the planning necessary to carry out a coordinated action, gets impatient and decides to independently accomplish the task. They F it up," unquote. The leadership of the cause felt that the original plan for the action was admirable, create an atmosphere where race riots would flourish with impunity. Another founding member, codenamed the Discoverer, overheard the comments and chimed in, quote, "The concept and its implementation failed because it lacked the military secrecy required and the necessary strategic alliances. The lack of a stringent security system permitted infiltration of their ranks. Background investigations would have eliminated from a position of confidence the FBI agent who infiltrated the group. He wouldn't have been able to gain access to critical data. As it was, we finally did penetrate his cover with the help of one of our Oklahoma City brethren. They're real sharp. We're going to do something together with them real soon. But his unmasking came too late, only 3 days before the FBI arrests. The plan did not fail because the FRS lacked weapons or dedicated followers. Its failure can be traced to Joe Allen, a Judas of the worst kind. He's just like the other Judas Martinez who helped the authorities capture and kill some of our people, those gallant members of the order. The ability of another Judas to corrupt the outcome of a planned action was an embarrassment to our cause. This will no longer be tolerated. That's why we made the decision to establish the cause. We have taken measures so that the cause cannot be infiltrated by traitors to the white race like those who infest the authoritarian establishment at all levels," unquote. We were all sure that a unification of white supremacist organizations with a council of only the 3 most loyal members of each member group would guarantee no more infiltration and embarrassment. It would also allow us to successfully pull off our 10-year anniversary celebration of Alan Berg's death. Again, Alan Berg was the Denver talk show host who was assassinated by the Order, the militant Nazi organization that was a spin-off of the Church of Jesus Christ Christian, the Aryan Nations group that is headquartered in Hayden Lake. Eventually, that group was brought to heel by law enforcement members. However, the full roster, I guess one could say, of the Order was never fully taken stock of or brought in, and it's pretty evident, at least if one can believe the account presented here, that that type of operation and indeed that milieu has proceeded to grow and prosper. So again, according to Skinner's allegations, Operation Thunderbolt, the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and the framing of O.J. Simpson, was intended to, among other things, at least in temporal terms, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the murder of Alan Berg. Several things to call attention to. First of all, the founding member of CAUSE, codenamed Discoverer, talks about the need to implement strict military security and strategic alliances. He also talks about the assistance that this group apparently received, at least according to the account presented here, from one of their, quote, Oklahoma City brethren, and also talks about doing something together with them real soon. According to Skinner, the Oklahoma City operation was pulled off by this particular group, which apparently has infiltrated to a considerable extent many of the militia groups and Patriots networks as well. As I've indicated in the past, those groups are not coterminous by any means with Nazis or white supremacists. Many of the people in those groups are sincere patriots and very, very fine people, or even a few liberals in some of the militia groups. However, at the same time, there is a very dark underbelly to some of those groups, and I am personally critical of the lack of recognition or understanding on the part of many of the militia groups and the Patriots networks of the very virulent Nazi and fascist elements within their ranks. So some of them, according to Skinner, apparently pulled off Oklahoma City, and it was guilt over Oklahoma City plus his recurring Vietnam nightmares due to the Oklahoma City carnage and the slaughter of Ron and Nicole that prompted his change of heart. That concludes this segment. We're going to continue with our presentation of the very important and chilling book, Blood Oath, on the other side of this cassette.